Some of you asked for an in-depth video about Cardinal Thomas Wolsey and what he did to piss Henry off, so here we are. And although we love Sam Neill's representation, this is not the real guy, so let's go right back to the beginning. Before he became a cardinal, he was of course just plain old Thomas, and he was born around 1575 in Ipswich. We know him as the cardinal and the statesman who dominated the government of Henry VIII, but of course he wasn't born into this position, and he actually clawed his way up from the very bottom, which was partly why a lot of people hated him, because he did not come from nobility. And in fact, he was the son of a butcher, leading many people to insult him with butcher's boy throughout most of his career. But he went to University of Oxford, he studied priesthood, and in 1498 he was ordained a priest. And 5 years later, he became the chaplain to the Deputy Lieutenant of Calais, and that guy actually recommended him to Henry VII, which was Henry VIII's father. Wolsey then became Henry VII's chaplain, and shortly before Henry VII died in 1509, Thomas Wolsey was appointed the Dean of Lincoln. He was known to be uber confident, and it soon won over the very young Henry VIII. Henry VIII was notoriously known for not giving a fuck about paperwork, boring meetings, and so he actually gave this guy a lot of power so that he would have more time to play and joust and fun. Henry VIII then made him royal almoner, which means that he was in charge basically of money, like what was given to charities and whatnot. And over the years, Wolsey and Henry VIII's relationship became really close. Wolsey was also in charge of organising really big events, such as Henry's expedition against the French in 1513. And then, upon Henry VIII's recommendation to the Pope then created Wolsey the Bishop of Lincoln. And in 1515, Wolsey became the Lord Chancellor of England. To us, this might just be a bunch of words. We don't really know what it means, but basically it means he had a fuck ton of power. And just 3 years later, the Pope himself appointed Wolsey a special legate, which means that he had papal representation within England. This was a huge big deal for someone who pursued priesthood. And with all this power, Wolsey was a rich dude. In fact, he was the second most rich man in the whole country, only after Henry VIII himself. And this pissed off a lot of people. But of course, he never had anything to worry about because Henry VIII was his bestie. Wolsey was also in charge of raising taxes, and this of course arose a lot of widespread dislike of him. When the Pope died, Cardinal Wolsey actually wanted to become Pope himself, and he put himself forward for this position, and this was then reneged. He did not become Pope, sadly. But the immediate cause of Wolsey's downfall was his failure to persuade the new Pope, Pope Clement VII, to grant Henry VIII his annulment to the marriage with Catherine of Aragon. This, of course, was the beginning of Henry VIII's negative view of him. He saw him as having failed his king, and that finally paired with the nobles' dislike of him because of his low birth, as well as the country's widespread resentment of him because of all the raised taxes, etc., etc. It was just not looking good for old Thomas here. And then he had one final attempt in 1529 to obtain this annulment for Henry. This, of course, collapsed. He royally fucked up in getting the annulment. Because, of course, the Pope and God did not believe that Henry VIII's marriage to Catherine was unlawful. They believed it was a true marriage. And actually, so did Thomas. So this was always a struggle for him anyway. He had to choose almost what to do. Does he serve his king or does he serve his God? In the end, he chose to serve Henry, but the Pope slapped him down and said, dude, what the fuck are you doing? With Henry VIII already pissed with him, it was very easy for the rest of the nobility to then turn the king against him. Suddenly, he was stripped of all his offices, and in 1530 he left London to reside in York. But it didn't stop there for poor old Wolsey, because Henry was later led to believe that he was actually conspiring to get his position back. And let's be honest, Henry was so gullible, anyone could whisper any old shit in his ear and he'd believe it. Of course, immediately, Wolsey was arrested, and on his journey back to London, which took about a month, he died of natural causes. So there you have it. Thomas Wolsey was a really complex character, and my video now is only really scratching the surface. He was so twisty-turny, he was so clever. He obviously attained his power through his intelligent mind. But of course he took advantage, he was greedy, and then in the end it came back to bite him in the ass.